Hi and welcome to Thete Gaming, where I'd like to discuss an interesting experience I had on Games Workshop's web store on Saturday in what looked like a trial run of the Dominion pre-order. In fact, quite sure it is. In a way, I suppose a good thing, but when more carefully considered, just represents the sort of poor behaviour that Games Workshop continues to lose a lot of respect over. So there I was on the web store before 10 a.m. as usual, usually log on at 9:45, waiting for the pre-orders. Now, I wasn't actually expecting anything that I was particularly interested in, but quite commonly there is something. There are still some Adeptus Sororitas models not yet released. I wasn't expecting them, but just in case I'd missed news of when they are coming out for pre-order, I was on, just out of habit now. Then at about 10 to 10, the web store just dissolved, just went away and was replaced by another screen. I went, no, panic, closed it down, opened the other one, still went to the same one. Basically, when I decided to read it, it was a digital queue. A message said that they were expecting heavy traffic on the site. Now, in the event, all it was pre-orders for some Gaunt's Heroes stuff. I've no doubt they've got a bit of a following in the hobby, but not the sort of thing that's going to melt the web store. If we think about what has melted the site in the recent past, I mean, the Soul Blight Gravelords caused a bit of trouble. Cursed City caused a complete meltdown. And then, of course, there was Indomitus, the 9th edition of 40k. When that was released last year, that was a nightmare. Massive problems. Well, the pre-order for 3rd edition Age of Sigmar Dominion is coming this Saturday. So, obviously, this was a test of the digital queuing for that. So the way it works is, if you hadn't seen it yourself, and again, unless you're a Gaunt's Heroes fan, why would you? It only lets on so many people at a time, presumably to stop it melting the servers. And I'm presuming it will let on more than it did this Saturday, because bearing in mind, I was in amongst the first people queuing this Saturday, and it still took me 15 minutes after 10 o'clock when the site went live again for me to be let in. There was no way I needed to be held in a queue for a quarter of an hour for Gaunt's Heroes pre-orders. So I'm imagining it deliberately throttled it. But the way it works is it keeps you in a queue until there's room to safely let you in the store, at which point it gives you 10 minutes to make your purchases and then bugger off. After 10 minutes, it kicks you out again, which is fine. I mean, even if you didn't know exactly what you wanted. And to be fair, Games Workshop could make that easier. They sort of generally tell you what's coming out for pre-orders that week, but it's not very specific sometimes in terms of like collections, bundles, things like that. But still, I think 10 minutes is enough to sort out your pre-orders, even if you were trying to do it on a potato of a phone or a computer. And as long as the system works, when tested properly, it should be better than the Indomitus Chaos. That was a mess. What I don't get is why they didn't test it for a more exciting recent pre-order Saturday. Like Adeptus Sororitas or Soul Blight Gravelords. The Soul Blight Gravelords would have been a better one because that stuff actually sold out really quickly. The Adeptus Sororitas didn't sell out really quickly, but presumably there'll be more people on for that than there were this Saturday. Why test it on what was, I'm sure by design, the quietest Saturday of the year? But anyway, we have this system that's going to be in place for the 3rd edition pre-orders that hasn't been stress tested, so it may work or it may not. What we do know is that Games Workshop are yet again undersupplying, however. Because remember when they said, well, you may or may not remember, it depends if you're into 40k, when Indomitus was coming out, got loads of it, got loads of boxes, as far as the eye can see. And then they sold out in 5 minutes. Well, the same thing is basically going to happen here. I'm even a little worried if you'd basically need to be in the very first wave in that digital queue to be able to get Dominion. And bear in mind, making sure you're logged on for when it dissolves and puts you in the queue is not going to necessarily put you in the first wave. If there are more people waiting, which there will be, than it can allow in at one time, it's hit and miss whether you're in that first wave. I mean, let's be clear. If they were producing enough sets, they wouldn't need this system. The reason the web store melts down isn't because there's loads of people wanting the stuff. It's because you have to be on at the start in order to have any chance of getting it at all. at all. This isn't like a physical store where you might expect people to rush. I remember for a couple of expansions of World of Warcraft, for example, which is where I was in between my stints in this hobby. They're at midnight to get the copy, because that's as soon as I got it, I could be playing it. As soon as you buy it in a physical store, you can use it. If we order Dominion at 10 a.m. this Saturday, it is a minimum of 2 weeks before we actually get our hands on it. Minimum. Because not all of them will be sent out for Saturday delivery. The fact that they're doing this pre-order with 2 weeks in advance, like they did in Dominators, it's not to help us. It is to help them sort of get the labels on the boxes and everything to get as many out as they can for that Saturday delivery. But what is very common nowadays is some of them will just go out later in the week. So it could be nearly 3 weeks before some of us actually get it. Those of us who are lucky enough to get it at all. And this is one of my absolute top peeves with this company. See, people saying, there was someone doing a video recently, they're too focused on profit. Absolute nonsense. I wouldn't have any problems with them if they were focused on profit, because that would be in my interests. If they were focused on profit, they'd make enough of their products to meet demand. I mean, even without this system, I strongly suspected it was going to be essential to be on the web store immediately to have any chance of a copy. If you roll on at lunchtime, don't matter whether they had this system or not, you're not getting a copy. But what this system tells us, because we might have imagined after Indomitus, maybe they would stockpile a lot more copies. Maybe they put back, and we understand obviously suppliers being stifled at the moment because of the pandemic, but they would have put back the release date to make more copies so they didn't have this customs relations nightmare. But no, the fact that they're putting this system in means that with 100% certainty, we know that anyone at all who's late to the party has no chance. Hopefully there will at least be core rule books available on their own. But then you could say, well, if someone's on a budget and it's like, well, they can't afford to buy the book now and then try and get the box months down the line. They can't afford to just waste money like that. They need to get the box set to get the models and everything else that they want. They may have to do what many did for Indomitus, and that is wait for weeks or even months to even get their hands on the rules. And that galls me, because that's not for profit. That's not a profit versus customer situation. It hurts both. I've said it before. I had left the hobby long before Age of Sigmar came out. It was World of Warcraft, and returned at around 2nd edition. Now, I gather a lot of people left the hobby when Age of Sigmar was released, and I can see why. It was a complete shambles of a system. The whole game was a mess. I also have worries for 3rd edition, but that's for another video, and I'm a bit more hesitant on that. If there was enough stock that people could pre-order it at any point this Saturday, or preferably over the coming of that week. You understand, at some point they might sell out and you might have to wait then. But anyone who really wants it is certainly going to order it in that first week of pre-orders. There'd be no meltdown on the web store, and no need for a queuing system. People would just be able to log on when it was convenient for them and pre-order. So what's going to happen now is that anyone who is, let's say you're working a job at 10 a.m. this Saturday, and you don't have the option of sneaking off for a break to try and even then you'd have to hope to get lucky with the queue. It's no good just saying, I'll take my break at 10 to 10 to get yourself in the queue as soon as possible. Log on. If you're stuck for an hour in the queue, no one's going to give you a break for that long. So basically, if you're working at around about 10 a.m, you've got no chance of ordering it. You may, if you're lucky, be able to get someone else to do it for you, or try and do it for you. But otherwise, they're knackered. Anyone who is free, but doesn't get lucky with the queue, even if you're on as early as anyone else, is also knackered. Anyone who's just entering the hobby, the friends getting them excited, oh, this thing, oh yeah, let's look at that. But they haven't engaged in pre-order drag race before. They don't know how it works. They just think, oh, it's coming out for pre-ordering this day. Oh, it's 2 weeks till release. Oh, I've got bags of time to get on and pre-order my copy. Well, they're also knackered. Because they may not even know you have to be there at the very start, or you've no chance. And this is one massive reason why I find it extremely difficult to find other players these days. See, before I left the hobby during Warhammer Fantasy Battle, I had no real problems finding opponents. I could find opponents at the local club. I could get people to come round to my house. I had a setup to play. I was fine. I could get a couple of games a week, no problem. Since I've returned, it's been really tough to find AOS players. Sometimes I've gone weeks on end without a game. Pre-pandemic, nothing to do with COVID. And I wasn't living out in the sticks or anything, in a town, a sizable town. Just couldn't find them. And the main reason, it's not that people don't like the game as such. Obviously, when Age of Sigmar made a complete balls up of the first edition, that put a lot of people off, and it's had to slowly build it up over second edition. Second edition, you know, I can just see was a big improvement. I mean, the game has its issues, and it may well have some more this in a couple of weeks. But the real issue, what you hear people constantly complain about, is the customer service. You know, anyone, like for me, I actually really like Games Workshop games. I enjoy playing them. I have tried playing games produced by other producers, and it's like, I could play it once or twice, but I couldn't get into it. Whereas with Games Workshop games, I actually do think they still do a really good job for all my complaints. But anyone who would consider something produced by another manufacturer, if they actually do look at some other games and go, well, I actually like these just as much. Well, it's like, so I could play games by this manufacturer that has a good attitude towards the customer, or I could try and put up with Games Workshop's appalling attitude. It's a no-brainer for a lot of people. And the issue with their business is, see, you don't just lose disaffected customers. Normally in a business, if you annoy particular customers, you annoy those customers and they go off somewhere else. You've lost them. Okay, you may not care. If I find myself, for example, who's mad keen on Games Workshop stuff, in a position where I just can't find opponents at all, there's nothing I can do about it. I have to leave the hobby. That's all there is to it. You know, a company like Games Workshop, you're already up against it in that tabletop gaming is naturally less accessible than the online gaming that originally took me away from the hobby for so many years. And the reason it took me away is not, again, it's not because I fell out of love with Warhammer. It was because that extra accessibility, I could go home, log on and play with people. And I knew I could do that every time that I didn't have work. Every time I wasn't busy, I knew I'd be able to log on. I knew I'd be able to play with people. With Warhammer, although I could get a couple of games a week and that was great, that's it. That's all it would be. So, you know, so it is more accessible online. You would think that a company in this position, and I can see why they went away from being a games company, despite the name, partly surprised they didn't rebrand, has now got the attitude that it's not a games company that makes models for its games, it's a model company that makes games for its models. But you would think a company would still want to position itself to prioritise the fostering of community as much as possible. It doesn't. For all its talk about building community, it doesn't. Like, for example, it doesn't even do something as simple as let you know where your local gaming clubs are on the site. You know, I go to a local gaming club. You wouldn't find it. I didn't find it through Games Workshop. You know, and those are my worries for not just our chances of getting this new edition this Saturday, but what it might mean for customers who are not fully committed. For the ones who, unlike me, you know, I would just chunter and have to wait. But I would wait. But what about those who will just go, I'm not doing this anymore? I already know some people who've already said that. You know, these are people who may be permanently lost to the hobby with another cack-handed release. And the thing is, it doesn't just lose those, it loses, you know, if you then isolate a player who would like to carry on with it, but there's no opponents, no players in their area, you've lost them as well. I also have more general worries about this new edition, even for those of us who can get a copy. But I will talk about that later this week as well. Going to be a bit of a week of woe, I think, for Warhammer. But until then, anyway, those are my thoughts. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. Until next time, I'll see you later.